excited to be with you today. I think most of you probably know me, Melody Rose. I'm an extension agent up in Greene County, Tennessee, in Northeast Tennessee. But the really cool thing about today is that I get to speak a little bit about where I come from. And y'all have heard many of our work group team members. They kind of aggravate me all the time because I'm always talking about North Carolina and how great the old North State is. Well, today I really get to brag on that because our speaker today is actually from the same rural farming community for which I was raised. And you can kind of see we're 40 years apart in age, but we both grew up in the Upper Crabtree community in Western North Carolina, just outside of Waynesville, in a county that actually borders Tennessee. So there's a lot of ties to Tennessee. And you're going to see that today with a lot of the bean seeds and some of the tomatoes that we're going to be talking and sharing the actual stories with. So the really cool thing, just to kind of provide some information about Bill, is that we are related. We actually can trace our lineage all the way back to Revolutionary War period. I guess our great-great-grandparents were Revolutionary War soldier and a Scotsman, Joseph McCracken, and then he married a French Huguenot, Sarah Vaughan McCracken. And so pretty much everybody in Upper Crabtree can at some point or another trace our lineage back to those two individuals. And just to kind of illustrate how important that really is, because the seed saving and passing the tradition of these ancient treasures that we know today as heirlooms, which are what we typically called old-fashioned until heirloom became kind of popular. This is kind of part of our legacy. It's part of our history that we've passed on through the years in the communities, within families. And it's just a way of preserving the past. It's a way of just savoring the flavor. These heirlooms, if you've ever had the opportunity to actually taste a true cornfield or a greasy bean or a cut short, they are just fabulous in flavor, maybe a little bit biased in comparison to some of our hybrid beans that we eat today. But the main thing that we want to do today is just share with you some of those stories. So not only are they high in quality and in flavor, but it's all about sharing that human element, connecting the past with our present, and then being able to pass that along to future generations. I have an 11-year-old nephew that's coming up, and I want him to understand the history and the stories behind these treasures. So with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Bill Best. He now resides here in Berea, Kentucky. He came here right out of, I guess, high school, came here in 1954. And I'll just tell him myself that was the year my dad was born. But I will tell you this too, I'm also a Berea College graduate. So that's another thing that kind of connects us and just to the true culture of the Southern Appalachians. And that's what we really hope to share with you today. So I'm going to step out of the frame here, and we're just going to have a conversation and share with you what we have on the table. So Bill, why don't you tell us how you got started in the seed saving business and why heirlooms are so, special to you?
This is a photograph of my mother in my first book at age 80, Margaret Best, who was the one who got me started picking beans. I would pick the cornfield beans. Actually, they were the Hill family greasy bean. I would pick the ones on the lower side of the vine, and she would pick the ones higher up. And I was fascinated by the colors. I was also fascinated by the stinging worms on the underside of the corn leaves, and she taught me how to avoid them as well, because they left quite painful welts on your arms. Of course, I later discovered that those same stinging worms were the larvae of the beautiful butterflies. Well, I never grew anything. I never saved any seeds. Mother always saved the seeds. But so when I came to Berea on the faculty and staff, and I was actually mostly an administrator in '62, a couple of friends, husband and my wife and I bought some property in Jackson County, 10 miles away from Berea. And we had a garden there that had been in gardening for generations. Our little neighbor, 10-year-old neighbor, and brought his mule over and plowed it up for us. And for the first time in my life, I ordered commercial seeds, and not assuming that they would be no different from the ones I grew up with. And we had good potatoes, good okra, good corn, good tomatoes, but the beans were, I couldn't believe how bad they were. And the other couple, the husband was a buyer for the Berea College food service. And he said he was in the garden. We shared vegetables. We had different parts of the garden, but we shared vegetables. And he said, well, you better get used to it, because that's the way it's going to be from now on. And I didn't argue with him, but I said to myself, not if I can help it. And so when we went home to for Thanksgiving that fall, and I told my mother a story about those bad beans, Blue Lake, they were relatively new variety at that time, tough as nails. And because I had let them mature fully, and the seeds were in, when the seeds showed, you could make baskets out of the beans, and still have toughness to spare. And so she went out and she said, I think I can solve that problem. And that got me started again growing the old-fashioned beans, which later came to be known as heirlooms. And I've been at it pretty much constantly since then. I've got 2 books on it. This one, the first one, the Ohio University Press. This one, the second one, by the University Press in Kentucky. This is the Willard Wynn yellow German tomato from Harlan County on the cover. Willard died just recently in his 90s, but he had moved from Harlan County to Rockcastle County, Kentucky, adjacent to Madison County, where we live now. But I was asked to write this book by a lady from the editor of the Ohio University Press, after she heard me give a talk on heirloom beans. And so I said, yeah, give me a few years and I'll do it. And it took me about the same time it took on this one, because I was visiting a lot of people. And then going back in time too. And the lady who wrote the foreword to this book, Dr. Gwen Henderson, is the state archaeologist for the state of Kentucky. And she made a talk, I think around 2005, at the Kentucky Vegetable Growers Association, and she had some photographs of 1,000-year-old beans there. And so I looked her up later, and we became friends, and asked her if she would write the foreword to this book, and she gladly agreed. Picking beans, taking seed sharing in Kentucky, seed saving and sharing in Kentucky about 3,500 years. But this, she gave me one of the slides, and then the Indians in Kentucky 1,000 years ago were growing the same 4 types that we're growing now. You know, regular cornfield beans, the cut shorts, same types 1,000 years ago. The fall beans, believe it or not, same types 1,000 years ago. And then the greasy cut shorts. We don't know if they were the same type of if they had the slick hull or not, but I'm assuming they probably did. But then this photograph on the other side is a near perfect example of a cut short, which are very highly prized by the Indians and by people who know about beans today, because they're very high in protein.
So can you tell us a little bit about the difference in the cut short and the greasy and the cornfield? What does all that terminology mean?
Well,
how does that differ?
The greasy beans means that it has a slick hull. photograph on here that I can, right here. And notice how crowded the seeds are in the hull, but notice the slickness there. And then the fall bean was typically grown a little bit later in the season. And this was the high protein food that served people well throughout the winter, because they didn't always have animals to kill. Deer were not always available on demand, but you could have your seeds safe from that summer, your beans safe from that summer on demand. And then this is the oldest way of preserving beans. This is the non-tough hack runner. This is the lazy white greasy bean, which is the largest of the greasy beans and is from Madison County, North Carolina. But anyhow, these are the four basic types of beans grown in the mountains for certainly 1,000 years, and still very popular. We sell a lot of beans of all four types. They're probably fewer. These are probably the smallest number that we sell are the fall beans, but a lot of people prefer the cut shorts because of the high protein quality, and then everybody seems to like the regular cornfield beans.
So the beans you have there to your right, the Walker Sisters bean, what's the story behind those?
The Walkers, this is the first year I've grown them, and I'm hoping that my son, who is now in charge of the Sustainable Mountain Agriculture Center, which we founded right here, and about 20 years ago, and we had, for many years, we had the seed swap the first Saturday and every October in this barn right here, and we would have as many as 300 people show up from all over the world, 15 different states, at least every year, in a small way as California. But the Walker Sisters bean is from the Cage Cove, and the Kermit Smoky Mountain bean, this is the first time I've grown it this summer too, and we'll try to get it on the website hopefully this fall. And with Michael growing them this summer, we're just now in the process of planting beans. I still have a lot to plant down here, and he's got, I think he's probably got an acre planted his. I'll grow 2 acres this year, mostly of these two varieties right here, because they're very popular at the farmers market. Then I sell shuck beans, leather britches, sometimes called fodder beans, in 2 counties in southeastern Kentucky and the adjoining counties in Tennessee. And that's what in her book Seed Time on the Cumberland, Harriet Arnold talked about fodder beans. But anyhow, dried beans, the oldest way of preserving beans. You rehydrate them over a period of several hours, then you cook them in just the same way the same seasoning that you use. My mother always used fatback, and my sister, my wife uses bacon. The sister uses, my sister used, I don't remember, olive oil.
So yeah, that's one of the best ways to cook beans, is traditional fatback.
Right.
Yeah. One of the things when we talk about saving, and you're saying this is one of the best ways to do that. If people are wanting to grow these, what is the process? How would they save these seeds from year to year? Like, how long do they need to stay on the vine? How do they know when to pick? What's the process involved?
Let them stay on the vine as long as possible. But if you're going to have rain several days in a row, then pull them off and then a dry area. Now that's after the hulls have already turned yellow. But if you are going to have sunny weather, leave them on the vine and then pick them off dry, but still lay them out somewhere and let them dry even more. Then shell them out, and as soon as possible, get them in the freezer. The original way of saving in the mountains that I've grown to, that I've learned about from the many people that I've interviewed, was to put a twist of tobacco in with them, and that would keep them, or put hot onions, peppers in, and that would keep the bean weevils at bay. And then when mothballs became available, almost universally people started using mothballs. But when electricity became available and people bought freezers, then universally they put them in freezer. And I've had 100% germination. My mother only owned one freezer in her entire lifetime, and that's where she put all of her bean seeds. And several years, I don't remember how many years after her death, my sister called, and my youngest sister, and she was the one who inherited the house that we grew up in the Rogers Cove community on Upper Crabtree. Then she said, there's a bunch of bean seeds on top of the freezer. Do you want them? And I said, of course. And so I drove down and got them. And several years later, she finally defrosted the freezer, and first time it had ever been defrosted. And she found bean seeds on the bottom that had been there for 35 years. She said, "You want these too?" And I said, "Of course." And I drove down and got them. And I had 100% germination that had been on beans that had been in my mother's freezer for 35 years. So that convinced me that that was the way to go. The big problem with beans is that the bean weevils, the eggs might hatch out and you see these little insects flying all over the place. And then you know you've got trouble. But I think it's almost universal now that people saving heirloom bean seeds, save them in freezers.
Yeah, that's very true. And what a cool story to have found those so many years later. And from what I understand, that's really what happens. And that's how you get a lot of seeds
Right.
from all over the Southern Appalachians. People just kind of find them
Right.
stashed or stored somewhere. And I think that was kind of the case with the Hill family bean that
Right.
that was discovered.
They had not been, according to Clarine, they had not been in a freezer. They'd been in a, I think, in the smokehouse, and she found them, and they, after probably 10 or 12 years, I don't remember the story now, but anyhow, she germinated them, and then she sent us some seeds from some of them. But the only bean that I can claim to have saved from extinction is the noble bean, because it was taken in 1898 by a man by the name of Mr. Noble to Oregon. And when he went out there to participate in the timber industry, and in probably 20 years ago now, one of the great granddaughters discovered nobody was growing the family bean. And so she tried to germinate them and had real difficulty. And she had read about me on the internet, and she contacted me to see if I would attempt to germinate some seeds. And she found I think a shoebox full, and she sent me several hundred, and I put them out on my back porch in some growing medium and tomato box. And actually, and I checked on them every day, watered them every day for 3 weeks, and I was about to give up because I could tell that the embryonic plant had dropped out of most of them because they'd gotten wet at some time and had swollen and then cracked, and the little plant had dropped out. But finally, my wife says, "Don't give up yet. I see some green." And shortly thereafter, 6 plants came up, and unfortunately, a grasshopper discovered them at about the same time I did, and he had already eaten one of them. So I had left me with 5. I pulled them out, potted them in pots, then transplanted them, 1 in my greenhouse, 4 in the high tunnel. And they all did well for a little while. And then I discovered the 4 in the high tunnel were being eaten by some kind, a couple of kind of bugs and ants and something else on the bottom. I've got it written about, and I've forgotten the dung beetles. And so I ended up with one plant in my greenhouse here, and it produced finally, before it died, 4 bean pods, giving me 11 seeds from extinction. I sent 5 back to the woman in Oregon. I gave 1 to John Kuykendall at the Blackberry Farm in Tennessee. And he got, with his 1 bean plant, he got, I think, 380 some seeds, and he gave me half of them. And the lady that I sent them back to in Oregon had a bumper crop with hers. And so that seed is now one of our most popular sellers on our website. And it's the only one that I can claim to have saved from extinction.
What a cool story.
But it
And-
was good. It was good to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Preserving a part of our past. So let's talk about the website just for a few minutes. You mentioned that the Sustainable Mountain Ag Center was founded here, and that was by you. And then Mike,
And
your
Michael.
son,
Well, he was one of the founders
Okay.
too. Yeah,
but now the operation has now moved
to
Middle Tennessee.
Tennessee Tech.
Yeah,
Just Livingston, just actually a little way south of Albany, Kentucky.
And your son is now running
He
that
is
part of the operation. So
and he's shipping seeds all over the world. We've all 50 states throughout Western Europe. There's some countries in Eastern Europe, Australia, and New Zealand.
that's awesome. And if y'all were to go to that Sustainable Mountain Ag Center website and go to the beans section, you're going to notice how all these beans have specific names. And you've heard Bill and I talking about some of those this morning, like the Walker sisters and the Lazy Wife and the Kermit. You've heard us mention the Hill family bean. So all of these beans are not only are we growing to eat them for flavor, but they're telling a story, and they're often related to, well, often the women of the family, or often a specific family or a community. So one of those, I did grow up in Upper Crabtree, but some of you have heard me in my Appalachian classes talking about the 12-mile strip, the Harmon Bend area, and the Pigeon River Gorge. And that's where my dad grew up, was at the Waterville Lake. And there was a lady by the name of Letha Hicks that lived on the 12-mile. And it's got a pretty cool story. Bill, would you share that with us?
Well, my youngest brother, your ag teacher, John, working with me and measuring tobacco acreage, and we went back to their very well, it was in the national forest at that time, I guess, but they were allowed to keep the land until they died. And I noticed that they had large crop of corn and large crop of beans, but no animals. And I discovered that they, Mr. Hicks was the one, presumably it was him making whiskey out of that, and he was very famous for his whiskey. But she was also famous for her beans, and Whitey Swanger, one of his customers for his whiskey, was down there one day and asked her, Letha, if she would share her bean seeds, and she refused. And so he went in that night and liberated some of them, and we still sell those beans on the Whitey Swanger Greasy, which we probably should say the Whitey Swanger Letha Hicks Greasy, but because it was really her bean, but he was the one that it became known for. And on that, I was just sent last week the Tar Heel bean from Oregon, also from a lady whose family had migrated to from Jackson County and Haywood County in North Carolina to participate also in the timber industry, and they had bought their beans with them. And those beans, and that's written about possibly in both books, that they had come to be known as the Tar Heel bean because they were from North Carolina. And I might add that some of the purest strains of Southern Appalachian beans are known in the northern tier of states, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Montana, Minnesota, and other places like that. They were kept in families for generations and are still there. And a lot of people have sent me their seeds too. The internet has been amazing. I know it has a lot of problems and it's been up to no good often, but it is for somebody like me involved in seed saving. I've got a world of seeds on the internet, Southern Appalachians, and I also specialize in them. There are other seed savers that have them from all over the world. I have them from the Southern Appalachian because I decided early to stick closer to home because there were too many not to do that. By the way, the most bean seeds are named after women because it was the women who discovered they were gardeners who discovered the mutant, and then they would grow it, this strange plant growing in their garden, and then grow it the next summer. And if it bred true, then they would share it with family and friends. And then the following year or so, within 2 or 3 years, it would be named after that woman and or the family in the case of the Hill family. But if you can start, but ain't Beth, ain't Betsy, ain't Bess, and you just go through the alphabet and you'll find bean seeds named after women.
That's such a cool history there, but also within Western North Carolina and of course bordering Tennessee, the Cherokee Nation
Right.
Really was instrumental in preserving a lot of these, because obviously those bean seeds were here long before colonization
Oh, yes.
occurred. So we know in our fruit and veggie trials, and y'all, many of you across the state are participating in that, and we've had these heirloom veggie seeds in since 2019. We've compared those, and the Hill family was actually one of those a few years ago, and the turkey crawl, and even the lazy wife that you see here on the table. But this year we have the Cherokee Trail of Tears bean, and we know that is pretty popular because up here in Northeast Tennessee, we are growing that in trials, and that's actually what we've made a push to do at the Northeast Tennessee Research and Education Center, is to focus on these heirlooms and these old-fashioned cultivars to be able to kind of share the past with the present and the future. So when we talk about the names of these bean seeds, the Cherokee Trail of Tears and their influence, can you speak to that and why it's so named? And
well, I guess I believe it was in the 1850s. I don't remember when a lot of the Indians were rounded up and had to walk out to Oklahoma. And this is one of the beans that they took with them. What is not known is that a lot of the Cherokee didn't. They were farming in southeastern Kentucky during that time. And in the Upward Bound program at Berea College, we had a lot of students who were near full Cherokee, and I taught a course for Berea College in Jellicoe, Tennessee, and there were 30 some students in it, and all of them female except one male who was the son of one of the others, and everyone was either full Cherokee or nearly full Cherokee, and I was astounded, and I didn't get any seeds from them at that time, but anyhow, the ones that were rounded up were the ones who were more or less living in North Georgia and Western North Carolina, and then enough of them hid out in the mountains so that they were able later to reclaim enough land given back to them by the federal government to form the Indian reservation out there. But the Trail of Tears was taken with them, and the variant that I have, and it may be the only one available, is a very dark seeded bean. And but I've got a Cherokee bean, long Cherokee, long greasy, and the Cherokee have actually contacted me about reclaiming some of their ancestral seeds, and I'm glad to help whenever they contact me to give them as whatever I can.
And that's a great way to see that connectivity, because again, it's connecting our past and
Right.
showing, just how these are true treasures that we need to preserve. And it kind of keeps the family legacies.
And
And
then
the
looking
cultural
to my
legacy.
own past, wondering why I became so obsessed with this, I discovered I'm over 20% Cherokee myself. So in ancestry.com and what have you.
Well, one more
Beans in
thing.
your jeans.
Yeah.
It's in my genes.
One more thing on the Cherokee. I know a couple of years ago when I put candy roasters, I planted those out at the research center. I had several folks that had never heard of such. They did not know what a candy roaster was, which is actually a winter squash. But that too kind of came to us from the Cherokee
Right.
and from that Western Haywood or Western North Carolina region. Can you just speak to the candy roaster?
Well, when I was growing up, we grew pumpkins for jack-o'-lanterns and cattle feed, but we grew candy roasters to eat because they were much better flavored. They also were very long and weighed up to 50 pounds. And at the Western Carolina Farmers Market at Asheville now, it's my understanding from being there many times during the late season that most of the ones sold there are from farms on Crabtree where you and I are from. And I was interested to learn that. I just had no idea that was the case. But we sell the candy roaster seeds on our website, and they have become one of the most popular things that people buy.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people brag on my pumpkin pie, but I have to tell y'all, I'm not using pumpkin. So you're gonna get
Right.
true old fashioned.
We
Candy
actually
roaster there.
have candy roasters in our home garden trial this year. They're named as North Georgia, so you would assume that that's a different
Yeah.
collection.
Well, no, I think then it may be. I think maybe somebody has given it that name, but they were from North Georgia, Western North Carolina, and East Tennessee, not Upper East Tennessee, but Lower East Tennessee, right adjoining Haywood County and down there. Right.
Cool. Well, we're going to shift gears just a little bit here because we've been talking primarily about the beans, and hopefully y'all have seen just how intricate the network is for seed savers and how to do this and how it does kind of connect the dots, and we draw lines to our family heritage and like I say, we're just preserving the past. But now Bill also has a high tunnel here on site, and he grows several tomatoes that he also sells at the farmers market. And just as an FYI, he's got 1,500 different varieties. Right, is that right?
Of beans,
Of beans.
bean seeds.
Oh,
Right.
bean seeds and
And
tomato.
we've had a couple questions about the website, and
Oh,
we'll
okay.
include that in the email wrap up. But it is Sustainable Mountain Ag.
Yes.
Agriculture Center,
Yeah.
SMAC, saving yesterday's seeds for today and tomorrow.
All right. Well, let's shift gears from the 1,500 bean seeds into tomatoes a little bit, and we probably don't have time to walk up there, but Natalie ran up there and got us a few tomatoes out of there. And I don't know if y'all can see this, how big of a tomato. We weighed this last
2
night.
pounds.
And it was 2 pounds. You want to tell us the story behind?
That's the Sutton family heirloom from West Virginia.
We had to throw West
All,
Virginia
all's
off.
fair, right?
Yeah,
in our
exactly.
geography competition, we had to get in some West Virginia.
Yeah. And then you've got a tomato that you're really fond of. Is it the William Van tomato?
Willard Wynn,
Willard Wynn.
but this is the blackberry tomato actually
Blackberry tomato.
from Berea County, Kentucky. And this is one that I'm really fond of. This is the Willard Wynn Yellow German from Harlan County, Kentucky originally. And there are many variants of that. Last time I counted, I think there were 30. Some people have commercial seed catalogs are calling this Mr. Stripey and things like that. And I can't imagine the Amish calling something like that Mr. Stripey, but anyhow, they're claiming it was an Amish heirloom, but
Now, you have a tomato up there that you've got multiple colors of. It's red now. That's the one Natalie and I were able to try last night, which was very good. Sorry, y'all. Mighty tasty. But it's also pink. And then did you say?
well, I dedicated this book to Vincent Watts, and he was he worked on this one tomato for 52 summers. It was given to him by his labor supervisor at Berea College, the dean of labor, who was from Lee County, Virginia. And Vincent was from Breathitt County, Kentucky himself. And he grew nothing but that tomato in his garden for 52 summers until he died at 78 in 2008. But he would never save seeds when he had a mutant show up. But when I started growing his tomato, I wasn't quite as concerned about the purity of that one tomato. And so when a mutant would show up, and we had a pink mutant show up that was about an inch in diameter with outstanding flavor. And I named it after the mountain right here behind our house. And then it mutated in some other land that we owned a half mile downstream and was black. And then Vincent Watts has mutated again right up here in our high tunnel, and it's red. And that's the ones that you all ate last night. And we're going to take some plants and plant them outside and see if it breeds true next year. And if so, then we'll put it on the website as well. And probably, I haven't decided yet, but if it breeds true, I might just name it after Vincent himself. I think he wouldn't mind on that, the Vincent Watts tomato.
Very cool. And just in regards to the tomatoes, like what is one of your favorites besides the Vincent Watt, and maybe a story behind one of those? Probably too many to choose from.
Well, yeah, but when I was a child, we grew only red tomatoes, and I don't even remember what the names were. They were just tomatoes. My favorite tomato story is, though, the one year that we didn't have a killing frost before Thanksgiving, and so, but we had the snow on Thanksgiving Day, and I went out into the tomato patch and brought in fresh tomatoes from a freshly fallen snow. That's my favorite. But some of your on your I don't remember one of your kinfolks, but I don't remember how close, had a tomato similar to that, and I wish I had gotten seeds from it, but it was this one is such a the tomatoes are color coded. The pinks are sweet and tart. The yellows have some tartness, but are primarily sweet, and the reds are tart. And the blacks, like this, they have a complex system of flavors. What we've discovered is that at the farmers markets is that the heirlooms are the favorites. And I might add that at the farmers market in Lexington, starting in 73 and Berea in 74, people from over Eastern Kentucky brought me their seeds because we called them old-fashioned beans and old-fashioned tomatoes at that time. This was 10 years before Seed Savers Exchange was established in Decorah, Iowa. But we were very much into heirlooms already, what came to be known as heirlooms.
So if people are like, even if they're purchasing from somewhere like So True Seed, did they get a lot of those seeds from here through various seed savers?
What has concerned me in the past is that whereas I have gone out searching for seeds and had conversations with the people who have developed seeds, family seeds. There are seed organizations that I won't name that have gotten their start almost exclusively from my collection. And I don't like that, but there's not a thing I can do about it. But when you look at, and I even asked one of them, I said, you're not allowed to plagiarize. Use your own description, but don't borrow my words. Just
Yeah. So when, for all of you that are tuning in and watching right now, you know, if you happened upon some seeds in a freezer or in, I don't know, a lonesome shelf in a basement or an old smokehouse, and you're looking to kind of preserve that legacy, Bill would be a great resource.
and I just last night I had a half-hour conversation with a fellow from Wise, Virginia, who is wanting to send me his father's collection of 86 bean varieties, many of which we have already, but he's also suggested to him that he give some, share them with Mountain Empire Community College because they've expressed some interest in his collection as well. I said, just divide them between the two seed organizations and let them develop their own right there. I think that we need more seed banks and what some people, the seed savers, call in situ, right in the geographic area that where the seeds are found.
There will be a little bit of genetic movement over
Right.
time, right?
Right.
So to kind of wind us up, because I think we're getting near time and we may have some questions, but we kind of started this segment talking about how it's all family oriented and family related, and we can kind of trace back those lines through the stories of these bean seeds and such. So Bill, to kind of wind us up, we talked a lot about your family and you know, going all the way back to your mama there and on Upper Crabtree and your family, your brother and all that good stuff. A lot of them have their hands into saving the seeds and kind of preserving that legacy. From my understanding, you've even got grandkids that are actively engaged in preserving the past. And
great granddaughter who is learning how to string beans.
so what a great way to get our kids involved and be able to pass that along as well. You know, we're just really thankful for your contributions because, you know, y'all, if we're not saving these seeds, it's kind of like he said, we've lost some of these heirlooms, we've lost some of these old-fashioned seeds, and we got to do our part to preserve these stories and keep them for our future generations as well. Is there anything else you want to share, Bill?
My final chapter in this is the high price of cheap food, because so much of modern plant breeding has been to ship foods and shipping distance and long shelf life, and nutrition has been left out. Modern bean is protein free because you can't let the seeds appear, otherwise it's too tough to eat. And I just think we can't turn the food supply over to the multinational corporations. We've got to keep going small, many small operations producing food for anybody and everybody to buy at farmers markets and community supported agriculture and things like that. Some things that have sprung up to compete with the multinationals.
Do you have any tips for beginner seed savers? I mean, would beans be where you'd suggest they start?
Grow your own, then save the seeds.
And share. Don't forget to share.
Yes,
With
right.
family members and friends, and that's kind of again what keeps.
Letha Hicks was the only person I remember who refused to share hers. I've heard talk of other people who refuse to share them, but most of the time people are not only anxious to share, but they brag about what they've got.
Yeah. All right. So as we kind of wind it up today, first off, I want to thank you, Bill, for joining with us and sharing all your knowledge with us on this. It has been an entire lifetime you've dedicated to seed saving and preserving these legacies, and we appreciate that. And we hope you as viewers have recognized the importance of how important about and planting these tomatoes, old-fashioned tomatoes, that you just kind of maybe take a little time for reflection in the garden and think about just how long those seeds have been passed down through the years and growing, you know, for years, literally, and just, you know, really think about maybe being able to preserve some of that and pass it on to your own kids and grandkids, because that's kind of what keeps this art and practice alive. So we really appreciate you joining in. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself. I can get those to Bill. Make sure you visit the Sustainable Mountain Ag Center's website for a lot of different seeds,
Heirlooms.org.
heirlooms.org. And make sure, yeah, just check out this book, Saving Seeds and Preserving Taste. It's got a lot of valuable information, and we'll share a lot more with you.
Order that. Well, they can order that from the website, but they can also order this one on Amazon. We don't have it on the website yet. But the one thing that still sticks in my mind, when my friend said, when I complained about the toughness of the beans, and he said, you better get used to it. That's the way it's going to be from now on. And then I said, not if I can help it. And that's what I've spent a lot of my life doing, not helping it.